ensure our elderly have 24/7 registered nurse care. I've got a very big document on the website for that one because it's a bit more technical, but essentially it comes down to say 85% of residential aged care facilities have an RN on 24/7. The other 15% employ somebody that's called an enrolled nurse, okay, and they have a certificate for. Now, you can get a certificate for because you're vocational, you're passionate, you care about the community, you want to be a person who's in the caring industry and do good for them. The fastest way to get there is to go and do one of these little certificate for courses. Now, theoretically, somebody can complete that course in just a couple of weeks because we took the hours of what needs to be done and the modules they need to tick off, and they're already passionate about it and have some experience. Theoretically, that's quite quick. Now, compare that. Now, that might cost $2,000 as a fee. Compare that to a registered nurse. They've spent 3 years in a university standard facility and they've got a huge HECS debt, but they are even more passionate about doing the right thing for people. So, look at the policy, look at the suggestions there, and I'll show you how you can go and get those registered nurses in there and swap the poor girls that are involved at the moment as ENs and upgrade their skills so that they can do more things and get paid more. So we've got probably half a dozen that are privately owned nursing home providers that are taking hundreds of millions of dollars from the federal government, and they don't report what they do. And they're the ones that are paying people at the lowest rate. So they're employing an EN at $24 an hour versus an RN on a bit more, and the RN wages can go up. So let's say a registered nurse can get $36 an hour or more. They don't want to pay that for a registered nurse. They're going to have some poor kid who's got basic training who can do some administration of drugs and say, this is all your workload and we're only going to pay you $24. Now, if you're somebody who can work in a cafe and just deliver the food around the tables, you can get $24 doing that. So why take on all those terrible risks and skills shortages and say, I'm going to be an EN on night shift by myself with responsibility for all these people in a nursing home? And again, on my website, you'll see a link there to a very important piece of research that was done 3 years ago on who's getting how much money in the privately owned ones. And when you read that, you will not want to go to one of those ones ever. Next one, save our Indigenous wildlife. I came off a property that had 40 acres on a lovely little river and wildlife everywhere, wallabies in our vineyard and a pair of beautiful wedge-tailed eagles flying overhead, until one died from a pindone baiting poisoning incident. Now, as an example, I'm not allowed by law to pick up that eagle because of what it is. And if I did take it to the vet, the vets here don't know how to analyse it for pindone. And if I took it to a vet that could analyse it from being a secondary poison from pindone poison, people put it down to kill rabbits. By the time I get it to that vet in a specialist place, the pindone in that animal's gut would have dissipated so much they couldn't identify it. So the producers of the pindone product say there's no evidence that we have secondary poisoning. It's because you cannot collect the evidence in the way that it's done. So there's other things in there. I'm encouraging things like having a cull of rabbits as an introduced species being killed humanely with a shot to the head by the farmer, not people hanging over the fence having a go at everything that moves and people's cars and everything else. There's a whole bunch of things in there anyway to go and help the local wildlife. And how do we do that? And it, again, basically doesn't cost very much, delivers benefits going forward, and can start instantly tomorrow. Control more sensible urban redevelopment. Libby Stapleton, as the mayor down at the Surf Coast, has done a great job with people in that community to help them. It wasn't all her doing, I'm sure, but everybody in that community has been at this for many, many years to stop people getting into Spring Creek and carving it up to help the wealthy people get a lovely view of the bay by savaging some beautiful piece of the environment. The other part about this development is I'm frustrated, being a Geelong boy all my life, to see things like Armstrong Creek and Lara, where we knew that there were flood zones in there. That land was so muddy, farmers couldn't put a machine across it. When we walked through there, chasing tadpoles and stuff as kids, our gumboots would get stuck in that. And now we've gone and built massive housing developments on them because a developer can go to the council and say, okay, I'm going to build here if you let me go. And once we get it going, we're going to do things to redirect that water flow, and in a lovely dry year, we'll demonstrate to you that you don't need a flood overlay here. And the council says yes, and people get their houses built. And they go and say, now the flood overlay's been removed, we're going to make this a category for residential properties. And what we're seeing already now is places like Lara are coming back saying, right, hang on, the riverine flood overlay needs to change. With all this stuff built around it, water does not flow away fast enough. People are getting 10 mil of water, and all of a sudden they've got 50 mil sitting in their backyard that doesn't drain for days. So the suggestion there now is saying we need to rework that, because people are saying, I've had a house here for 50 years, and now you're saying I'm in a flood overlay and I can't get insurance. And things go wrong. The 76,000 ratepayers in Geelong are now underwriting all these stupid decisions that were made by councils in the last years. And the property developers are famous names around Geelong. And some of them, I'm sure, it was totally unintended. They thought it was a chance to do something well, but the engineers that have put it together, well, it's showing the water doesn't flow. And water wants to go to the lowest place. It'll do it by itself. And we've changed the overlay of the land and we're in trouble. Now, number 13, reallocate the funding model between public and private schools. Again, we're back to the principle of probably 85% it's probably okay, but there's 15% where it is seriously wrong. In the catchment of Corio here, in that electorate, the standing member who's, the seat of Corio has been Safe Labor since Federation, and the current incumbent's been there for 14 years. If you look at his declaration of interest that he lodges with Parliament at the start of each election period, you might be surprised to see that he went to a school that these days has a $70,000 a year fee, that he has 3 houses, that he gets a salary of $382,000 a year, that he gets expenses in excess of $500,000 a year. Not much detail on where they go. He gets a couple of overseas flights to interesting places, and away you go. He's the sole beneficiary of a trust. You know what trusts mean? And the partner's a partner in a legal firm. But this is somebody who's representing the poorest of the poor, the most disadvantaged. And how representative is he, and how much lived experience does he have about what it's like really to be somebody in Corio or Nor Lane or Bell Park or you name it. So getting back to reallocation of funding models, earlier on this year, we had this job keeper process going around there. The school he went to picked up over $10 million for JobKeeper. There were universities got nothing. The reason why universities got nothing is because Josh Frydenberg said that their model is based on foreign students. Well, have a look at Geelong Grammar. Its model's got a heck of a lot of foreign students to it too. Now, that same year, that university provided a dividend profit that was even more than what the JobKeeper payment was from the government. Also have a look at some of the other grants that have just quietly gone into that particular school. So we don't mind if you're doing like-for-like things, but when you've got somebody getting an undercover equestrian centre and those sorts of things, how does that compare to a public school? It's ridiculous. I'm a Catholic. I've got some bias towards what the Catholic school systems offer. I think it's great. It's a much cheaper way than going to other private schools. It's a bit more interdenominational now. You don't have to be a Catholic to go there. You just got to say that I don't object to the Catholic things that they do. So Catholics sometimes get too much too. Not all of them. You've got to look at them fair. Guys, come and be fair. And say, in that particular model, what can we do? If we need to rebalance things, we need to rebalance it. But for the public, you've also got to recognise that if people weren't going to these schools, where would they go? Because the state system's not big enough. So to make a change overnight to say, let's make it all state and all equal, it's not going to happen. I'm saying let these people of faith have their own model, so long as they do it in a way that is consistent with the rest and the funding's the same. And, Catholics and Uniting Church and Lutheran and everything, fantastic in its day. People should not arc up when people come along and say, I want to have a Muslim school or a Buddhist school or a Hindu school. Or, we all had our faiths and we want our kids to be raised in the same way that we were raised. So long as the school education system's the same and the funding's the same, let it go. And again, I'm trying to do things for the 99%. And if you're the 1% objector who says, I don't want to have this and don't want to that, you've got to flip that mirror around and have a look at yourself. You're not looking out the window at the rest of us, you're looking just at yourself in the mirror. 14 is to assist the most in need, get to their own feet, and that those who want a job to find one. If I go back to, again, the grassroots of Corio and Nor Lane, you get out there at the Bunnings and do a 360 and you see just how terrifyingly poor those people are. In past governments, those commission houses were starting to decay and they knew what the cost of maintenance was. So they sold them on to the residents. Now, these are people on a pension who now find themselves paying more because they're going to, buy this place, but they've got no money left to go and provide the maintenance. So all these places are falling down around their heads. They need some help. I've got some strategies to do that. A lot of it is community-driven, low cost. Again, it's things like that tipping trailer. It's to go and have community battery-powered lawn mowers and other gear to help them help themselves. They can pop down to the corner and each street will have these things there ready to go, and they can come back and maintain their house better, be it scaffolds for painting, be it discounted tradies that will come in and help do those once a year safety checks to make sure the gas and water and electricity and safety smoke detectors are all working, those sorts of things. And then the job schemes, you know. People with a disadvantage are twice as likely not to find work. People with a disability are twice as likely not to find work. I've got ways that will help those people find themselves, identify what they want to do, where their passion is, and that those things can be harnessed and are very employable. So if they want to work, I think we can find a way. I've also got one that's very specifically targeted to the local Indigenous community, and I'm going to go meet with them and run through it because it's something that I had a look at a couple of years ago off my own bat when I saw one of their enterprises fail. And I went and met with them to have a chat about it, but the people that were there at the time, you know, like I said, I'm a bit out there. My ideas are too steps in front of people and I get too enthusiastic and I don't bring them with me on the journey sometimes. So this one I'm going to meet with them, and before I document it I want to make sure that we can sing from the same songbook. And I want to get more from the 3 tiers of government without costing any more. So we've all got to work together. This bit where the state government says we want to have zero emissions and the federal government starts releasing more drilling, more excavation, more gas, it's ridiculous. And also, you know, in my little area here, to have one local government saying we're not going to have gas, we're getting out of it actively, no one else can connect in new estates, and the neighbouring shire saying, hey, let's get everyone into gas, we're going to pay millions to get a pipeline out here. So my example here, and I'll just take the most basic one, is when I went up to the ballot roll in Burke Street 3 weeks ago on the 21st, I was surprised to go and see all this work going on the footpath. So you've got all these lovely ballast slabs there, pavers, that are probably 600 by 300. And as they break, someone comes along, digs it out, and they put hot tar in there to go and make it a safer surface. And what the people were doing now was it's time to go and take those bits of hot tar out and relay and make a more stable surface again. So there are 3 people that are on stop-goes, there's barriers, there's bunding, people being redirected, there's trucks delivering things, there's cement mixers going, there's 3 or 4 very hard-working Pacific Islander Kiwi sort of blokes that are pulling up this rubbish and forming it all and putting down another mix of 1 part concrete, 5 parts sand, and leveling it up and putting them in there. Now, that's a very expensive gig, and I've been back there since and they haven't moved very far. The workers that are on their hands and knees are doing a lot, but the system's dodgy. So, look, if I was somebody who was a private contractor with this, I'd go back to something that's used in local government, and it's called Snap, Send, Solve. Somebody takes a photo of the problem, snaps it on, they send it off to the right department in the local council, and the problem's solved. My solution is to go and say, as soon as you've got a broken paver, Snap, Send, Solve, the subcontracted person, not the government worker, will pop out there and see, and in the process of pulling out that one that's broken, relay some sand and cement and put the new one in. So at 3 o'clock in the morning, when no one's about, that one paver instantly solved. Now that cost comparison, I'm guessing, is probably going to be 1/100th of the cost of what it's doing now when they go and do that process. So the government workers can be doing other stuff, and the contractors can do it in 1% of the cost. So there's one example again. We're going to get more from our governments because it's going to cost much less to deliver those sorts of services. Number 16, hold the government accountable while introducing the IBAC. It's got to happen. Whether it's retrospective or not, I don't know. In this election, as a candidate, I've seen the systemic things in there that just hold somebody back, whereas the government can sneak in things at will. I'll give you an example. I went to go and put public ads in to go and say this is what I'm doing, I want to run for the election. I can't get space in a paper because they've all been bought by the government. So the government knew an election was coming up and they contacted all the papers and said, I want to hold everything on half a page for the first 20 pages in. So there's ads in there now saying the government's doing wonderful things here, and there's ads in there saying the government's doing wonderful things there, but you can't see anything from anybody unless it's a current government person, a Liberal National. All the rest is the way down the back. So that's how they structure this, to cheat people. The next point is, I'm running, so I have to comply with the polling requirements. As an example, I cannot offer tea and coffee at a stall because that's considered to be an inducement. As a candidate, you might be trying to bribe somebody to make them vote for you. You can't do that. Now that's me paying for tea and coffee, and it's just a tea and coffee, and would that tea and coffee be something that changes your mind? Right? I don't think it would. In comparison, we've got the government coming out there and the opposition matching it and coming up with its own, pork barrelling. Millions and millions of dollars of debt. It's not money we have. And it's going for silly things that the government's not traditionally responsible for. I mean, where is the government's role to go and say, we need a shed over this sports ground? That's not its role. So both of them are at fault here, and both of them should be caned for it. So let's get an eye back in and let's go through it in great detail and do those comparisons from the lowest level. Another one for me is that I'm somebody who, because of my health background and my health initiatives, would have done well, I believe, from all those hundreds of thousands of people that are in residential aged care and the likes. So I have everything together to go in there with the election people and help those people make their choices of choosing me on below the line, the white paper, choose me first, and 11 other places. But lo and behold, just a couple of days ago, the Electoral Commission tells me, no, you can't do it anymore. Those people that are in nursing homes are not going to have people come through helping them to vote. And if they want to vote now, they're going to have to register for a postal vote. Now, the practicality is the postal vote application will not get back in time for those people to vote. So if they are on the roll and they can make it to a polling booth, and they're not ambulatory, they could go and do something. Now, if they were doing something in the nursing home and they're having trouble understanding it and putting names and numbers in boxes, who would they ask? They'd ask the nurse attending them. Now, you know the nurse's position on this because the nurses people are the ones that have been pushing for this 24/7 elderly registered nursing. So they're going to try and, unintentionally I'm sure, direct people to, if you want to have the best care, you really need to go and vote for the Labor Party. So I think there's a systemic issue here too, because although the people that are controlling the Australian Electoral Commission say, oh look, it was obvious from the start that you weren't going to be able to get in there because of COVID restrictions. 2 weeks ago, the Victorian government lifted those COVID restrictions. People can go in there if they wear a mask and are one of the 5 visitors for each resident, and maintain distances and hand hygiene and the likes. So really, there's been a systemic failure here that's preventing people like me getting in there and helping people look at me as a viable choice to others. And that has disadvantaged me, and I think there's potential, if I don't get in, to raise that issue. Also, if I do get in, there's potential for me to go and turn around and I'll put up a private members bill that looks at holding the government accountable. And that's the federal government, but I'm also going to go down lower because I've got examples from people about the corruption in right down to local government and property development, where you've got people that are mayor who are also real estate agents who are also working for the main person who's going around, and I'll say it under parliamentary privilege, the examples of the terrible, terrible things they're doing to poor little old people in country towns, saying, I think your house is worth this, I'll help you get in your aged care because your husband's just died, and here's some money, when they know that the price they're giving that poor old lady is only 1/3 of the true value. And then they carve it up and make money hand over fist while she goes off with nothing. Now, number 17, knowing you had backed a winner in the big race. If you put me number 1 below the line on that white paper and spread the other 11 to the parties that you like, and you get me in there, it's like the Melbourne Cup. Everybody wants to know that they've gone and had that winner, and you can be part of it too. And number 18, look at all these things I've just given you. They cost next to nothing to start. They deliver exactly what the people have been complaining about, and everyone gets to their happy place. Now the next one is something we haven't spoken about, and that's the bigger issues. And that's something like our relationship with China. I mean, how ridiculous is that to have ScoMo and that bashing his chest saying we'll show them. They're 27-to-1 population of us. They're probably the same ratio of every sort of tank, submarine, missile, stuff that's going around. I'm a person who's travelled the world. I was in China just before the outbreak with my family. I'm all about relationships. I think I understand the Chinese people a little bit better, and also their leader. I'll give you one example. If you've got a close friend there and you're talking with them and you get the whiff on their breath that they've got a rotten tooth, there's decay there. You're at the party, you're at the restaurant, do you crawl it out? Do you scream out, hey, Bobby's, look at the bloody mouth on him? No. You go up to a quiet moment, you turn shoulder to shoulder, put your hand on the side and say, I don't want to be offensive here, but mate, you're probably not aware of it, but you might have a bit of tooth decay, your breath smells. Now, you can see, you can regulate that, you know what's going on because you're there and you know them and they know you. And what do you think their reaction would be? Chances are they're shocked, but they're pleased you told them. That's how I'd work a relationship with China. I'd actually be a friend, I'd try to understand them better and them understand us. Vanuatu, Solomon Islands, the likes, I took my daughters around there on a cruise a couple of years ago where we retraced my father and my wife's father's service history. And we went through these fantastic tours around there, but again, geez, it was insightful to know how those people live and how they operate, and a lot of it is a bit like our Indigenous people. If somebody has wealth, the whole family, all the relations are entitled to a bit of it. So in those countries, something that's solved their issues has been that you've had the Chinese traders run all the shops, and the people don't mind that. That issue that flashed up recently was about, one island, one population was supporting people from Taiwan who'd been their traders for so long, but one politician decided, Chinese want Taiwan back, Chinese are bigger than Taiwan, I'm going to side with Chinese mainland, and that's where the conflict came. The sorts of things that have been thrown back at us in Australia are incomplete by most media, particularly the ones that are the Murdoch media. ABC, SBS do a great job by comparison, so please try to focus your attention with them. So, in that situation, we've got to go back there and again be a friend. Go over there at the right level. Sit down with them. Have a carver. Try to understand where they're coming from. And be a friend, not an overlord saying, we're smarter than you, we're cleverer than you. I mean, one little tour we did there to people in Alatau, and probably the southern tip of Papua New Guinea. Fantastic. They did a presentation so people off the tourist boats could see what life was like for people that were living in the villages. And they showed us how to do this and how basically a coconut could be made into clothing, into a sunscreen, into a food, into everything like that. All dressed in indigenous historical clothes, look like they've come out of the jungle, and fantastic. At the end of it, I'm having a chat to them. So the lady that's running this thing is a 16-year-old girl, and she's just trying to do something innovative for her community, and she's fantastic at the marketing and the front for it all. Her mother was a high school teacher. I think she might have been high school principal, but she could see when these boats come in that she can earn a month's wages in one day by getting people to these sort of events, and that the public responds to, I'm a foreigner, I want to know the Indigenous experience. And her husband, he too, was like an engineer and incredibly intelligent fella. But when you look at them dressed in their local stuff, telling the story the way that the visitors want to have it to feel like they're going back to the culture of the people of the time, you wouldn't think it. Ask that one more question. Don't look at somebody on face value and say, that's who you are. And once you do that, it's much easier to get along, and you have respect for them because you realise, bloody hell, I was wrong. They're clever people. They're wonderful. They're doing their bit. We should learn from them. That's a great model. So I'd go over there and have a chat. I would go over there and listen. I'd go and ask them what they think we could do to work together. China's in that area. They were there when we were there years ago. They had their ships offshore. They're all quite helpful. They come in and do things. There's a role for everybody. We don't have to be competitive here. The focus here is to help the people in those islands. I don't think Australia should get too excited about whether there's ships going there or not. It's whether you keep doing things. If Australia keeps beating its chest and talking about war, as we've seen with the history of war, you do it long enough, you've gone and alerted your enemy, and your enemy will say, you're actually having a go at me every day of the week, I've got to shut you up because you're ridiculous. When you've got somebody with so much power, so far, far greater than ours, you're taking it the wrong way. And again, we've been selling land to China for years in here. We've been getting China to make all of our produce. You've got such an ignorant viewpoint now saying, we'll show them, get along. And the last point is a bit more controversial, and it's about helping the people in the Ukraine. Now, I sent a suggestion over there to the Ukrainian Prime Minister. People who know these things know that there's a particular portable anti-tank weapon that's only $30,000, and that there's a particular drone that's only $5,000. And you can get it on GoFundMe pages where people put together a $35,000 package. We're saying that they could be flown in for an hour at a time into the Ukraine. The Ukrainian person then goes and puts their mobile phone onto the cradle, recharges the battery and sends that drone with the anti-tank weapon on it another hour in. And what we've suggested is that President Putin should know that this is possible and know that this can happen overnight, and that the world can go and fund these things at only $35,000 a time. And if you had 1,000 of those in the Ukrainian hands in a week, the war would be over. But what I'm suggesting is we need to tell Mr. Putin that this is the concept, this is possible, and if you don't pull your troops out now, the GoFundMe will start, these anti-tank missiles will start. Remember at the start of the war, we had that dramatic shots of tanks, people just coming up with something on their shoulder and going bang? This particular product is something that the UK provided 18 of at the start of the war in February, and they're the images you're seeing. Those images you see where a helicopter shot down or a jet shot down, it's the same product. So $35,000, be it one, be it 100, be it 1,000, that will change the face of that war for the Ukrainian people. I know it's controversial, but that same technology is what Australia should adopt. We should have that all around the boundaries of Australia. If you're concerned about any threat coming to us, imagine you've got that on your shores. Imagine they can go to an arsenal and have it released to the populace. So when you say that a war's been declared and we've been attacked, all of a sudden we have got tools and weapons that will take out the aggressor's intentions. We've become a very defendable nation that just, these things sit locked away, they have a 20-year shelf life, but it's only when somebody crosses our border that they be activated. And who'd cross your border if you've got $25 million people and a heck of a lot of these things sitting there in a defence system ready to go? The drones can be used by everybody every day, you're just going to keep the missiles locked away. Simple little concept, very cheap, easily funded, easy transportable, and solves the problem. Wacky and out there, but hey, put it on the table, Mr. Putin, you need to get your troops home.